The cabin lights flickered as passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, searching for their seats. At first glance, it was just another routine flight. But for Juan, a quiet, sharp-dressed black millionaire who had worked his entire life to build everything he had, this moment would turn into something unforgettable. He spotted his seat, a first-class spot he had booked weeks in advance, the reward for countless hours of work and sacrifice. Yet as he approached, something was wrong. Sitting comfortably in his seat, with her legs casually crossed, was a young white woman named Elena. She wasn't just sitting there. She was acting like she owned it. Juan paused, his chest tightening. He politely leaned down and said, "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." Elena didn't even glance up. With a smirk, she replied, "This is my seat. Why don't you check again?" Her tone carried a coldness that cut deeper than her words. Other passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Juan pulled out his boarding pass, his hand steady, his voice calm. "Ma'am, 4A, this is mine." Elena finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "You must be mistaken. People like you don't usually sit up here." The words hung in the air like poison. A couple across the aisle gasped. A flight attendant froze, unsure whether to step in. Juan felt his pulse pound in his ears. It wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about dignity, respect, and something far bigger than this cramped airplane cabin. The tension was unbearable. The hum of the engines, the chatter of passengers, all of it faded under the weight of those words. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Juan could have walked away. He could have let the insult slide just to avoid a scene. But that's not who he was anymore. He had fought too hard, come too far to let someone like Elena erase his worth with a single sentence. Still, the flight attendant hesitated, torn between protocol and pressure. Whispers rippled through the cabin. People recorded on their phones, capturing every second. Juan stood tall, staring down at the woman who refused to move. And then, in a twist no one on that plane saw coming, the situation spiraled into something that would change the entire flight and leave everyone questioning what justice really looks like at 30,000 feet. So the question is, when a millionaire's seat is stolen and prejudice takes center stage, who really has the power? The one holding the ticket, or the one daring to defy it? Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just ground the plane. It grounded everyone in a reality they'd never forget. Juan wasn't just another passenger boarding a plane. To the outside world, he was a success story written in bold letters. A black man who had risen from the kind of streets people whispered about, the kind where opportunity never knocked, to becoming a self-made millionaire in his early 30s. On this morning, as he stepped into the airport terminal, Juan looked every bit the polished professional. Tailored navy suit, silver watch gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and an expression of calm determination. But behind that calm, there was a story few knew. Every dollar he earned carried the weight of years of struggle. Late nights spent working 2 jobs. Rejections that stung because they weren't about his qualifications but the color of his skin. And a determination to prove, not just to the world, but to himself, that he belonged. Traveling wasn't new to him. Business meetings in Paris, speaking gigs in New York, investment discussions in Lagos. Juan had learned to move with confidence in spaces where people like him were rarely seen. Still, he knew the stares, the subtle pauses, the way strangers sometimes measured him before speaking. He wore his success like armor, but the scars were always there. This trip was supposed to be different. A celebration even. After sealing a multi-million-dollar real estate deal, he was flying home to surprise his mother, the woman who had worked 3 jobs so he could study, who had prayed for him when the odds were stacked against him. His first-class ticket wasn't just about comfort. It was a symbol, a reminder of how far he had come, of everything he had fought for. As he waited at the gate, laptop open, he caught his reflection in the glass. For a moment he allowed himself to breathe, to smile, to think about his future. Yet somewhere deep down a shadow of unease lingered, because Juan knew success didn't erase prejudice. It only put it in sharper focus. And sitting just a few rows away was Elena, blonde hair tied in a sleek ponytail, scrolling her phone with the kind of entitlement that seemed to silence the world around her. She didn't notice Juan, not yet, but fate had already set their paths on a collision course. For now, though, the airport buzzed with the ordinary rhythm of travel. Families juggled children and luggage. Businessmen barked into phones. Flight attendants smiled with practiced warmth. And Juan, calm, hopeful, unsuspecting, was about to step onto a plane where his dignity would be tested in a way he hadn't faced in years. The seat he paid for was waiting. But so was a storm that would shake not just him, but every soul on that flight. The boarding announcement echoed through the airport. Juan stood, slipping his laptop into his leather bag. With calm steps, he walked toward the gate. His boarding pass beeped green, the universal sound of clearance, and he entered the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, the cool, recycled air brushed against his face. Flight attendants stood at the entrance, offering polite smiles. Juan gave a nod, his ticket still in hand. He moved past the narrow rows until he reached the first-class section, his hard-earned space of comfort. Seat 4A, window side. The one he had chosen weeks ago. But someone was already there. A woman, legs crossed, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone as though the world revolved around her. Elena. She didn't glance up when Juan stopped. She didn't move. She acted as though she belonged there, as though he was invisible. Juan cleared his throat politely. "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." No response. He tried again, softer but firm. "Miss 4A, that's mine." This time she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. "No, it's not. I'm sitting here. Why don't you check again?" Her words weren't loud, but the tone dripped with condescension. A few nearby passengers glanced over, sensing something was off. Juan calmly held out his boarding pass. "It's 4A, window seat." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Strange. I don't see how that's possible. Maybe there's been a mistake. People like you usually sit in the back." The phrase hit like a slap. Passengers nearby froze. Someone gasped. A businessman shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to hear, but his eyes lingered. The air thickened with silent judgment. Juan felt his jaw tighten. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "Ma'am, I paid for this seat. I'd like to sit down now." Elena leaned back, crossing her arms. "I'm not moving. You'll have to find somewhere else." "Maybe economy, or that seems more appropriate," her words carried, bouncing across the cabin. Phones discreetly lifted, recording. The flight attendant rushed over, smile painted but cracking at the edges. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Before Juan could speak, Elena jumped in. "Yes, this man is trying to take my seat. I've been sitting here since boarding. I don't know what his issue is." The attendant frowned, glancing at Juan's boarding pass, then at Elena. "Sir, may I see your ticket again?" Juan handed it over, calm but burning inside. The attendant scanned it, hesitated, then whispered to Elena. "Ma'am, this seat does belong to him. You're in 12B. Elena's eyes narrowed, but she didn't budge. "That's impossible." "This is my seat." He must have swapped with someone. Whispers spread like wildfire through the cabin. Juan felt every stare, some sympathetic, others skeptical. The humiliation wasn't just in her refusal. It was in the silence of those who watched but didn't intervene. The attendant tried again, more firmly. "Ma'am, please, you need to move." Elena's voice sharpened, louder this time. "Why are you taking his side? Look at him. Do you really think he belongs in first class? This is harassment." "You're making me feel unsafe." Gasps rippled. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." A man in the back laughed under his breath. Juan's stomach churned. He had faced rejection before, but never so publicly, never with so many witnesses staring at him like he was an intruder in his own success. He clenched the armrest of the adjacent seat, fighting the urge to lash out. The captain's voice interrupted over the intercom. "Cabin crew, please prepare for departure," but no one moved. The standoff continued. The plane couldn't take off like this. The attendant, now flustered, radioed her supervisor. More crew members arrived, whispering among themselves. Juan heard fragments: protocol, customer complaint, racial. He felt it, the shift. Suddenly, he was under scrutiny, as though his calmness was suspicious, as though his very presence was the problem. "Sir," the supervisor said carefully, "maybe it would be easier if you took another seat." "Just for this flight." Juan's chest tightened. The word stabbed deep. Easier meant give up your dignity. Easier meant accept injustice. He shook his head. No, this is my seat. I paid for it. I'm not moving. The passengers leaned in. Phones kept recording. Tension hummed in the cabin like static before a storm. Elena leaned forward, her voice dripping venom. See, he's being aggressive. I don't feel safe with him here. If he doesn't move, I want him removed from this flight. The supervisor hesitated. The flight attendant looked down. And Juan, standing firm, realized this wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about every moment he had been told he didn't belong. Every silent rejection. Every door that had closed in his face. The decision hung in the air. The engines hummed. Dozens of eyes watched. The plane would not take off until someone broke. But the question was, who? The plane sat motionless on the tarmac, but inside the pressure was unbearable. The hum of the engines mixed with hushed whispers, a theater of judgment where Juan was both the actor and the accused. Every pair of eyes in first class, and many from economy leaning forward to watch, were locked on him. Elena still sat smugly in his seat, arms crossed, refusing to budge. The flight attendants stood frozen, caught between protocol and fear of escalation. The supervisor's voice had been calm, but his words were a dagger. Sir, maybe you should just take another seat. The implication burned. Juan wasn't the problem, yet he was being treated like one. His pulse pounded in his ears, each thud reminding him of the choice he faced, bow his head in silence or stand in defiance. He drew a slow breath, fighting the tremor in his chest. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of years of buried indignities. No, I'm not moving. This is my seat, and I will not be silenced, not again. The words hung in the cabin, electrifying the air. Some passengers exchanged startled glances. Others nodded quietly as though they'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to break the cycle of compliance. But Elena pounced, her voice sharp and shrill. See? Look at him, raising his voice, making threats. He's dangerous! If he doesn't leave, then I'm not staying on this plane. Gasps scattered across the cabin. Someone muttered, Unbelievable. Another whispered, This is disgusting. The supervisor swallowed, clearly rattled. Ma'am, please calm down. Sir, Juan cut him off holding up his boarding pass. No, don't sir me. Don't act like I'm the one causing this. This ticket, this seat, I earned it. Do you understand what that means? Years of sacrifice. Years of being told I wasn't good enough. And now right here in front of everyone, you want me to give it up because she can't accept that a man like me belongs here? His words cracked open the silence. For the first time, real courage seeped into the cabin. A woman a few rows back spoke up. He's right. I saw his ticket. That's his seat, another passenger added louder. Why are you punishing him instead of her? The tide began to shift. Dozens of eyes that once judged now glared at Elena, at the crew, at the injustice playing out before them. Elena's smirk faltered, but she doubled down. She shot up from the seat, pointing an accusing finger. If this flight takes off with him here, I'll sue this airline. He threatened me. Enough! Juan's voice thundered through the cabin, silencing even the engine's hum. He wasn't yelling in anger. He was roaring with truth. Every ounce of restraint, every scar of humiliation poured out in that single word. He stepped forward, towering over the seat. His voice shook with emotion but carried clarity no one could ignore. I have worked too hard, come too far, to let anyone strip me of my dignity. This is not just about a seat. This is about respect, about humanity, about the fact that every time someone like me earns their place, someone like her tries to erase it. The plane was silent. Passengers held their breath. Even the crew stood paralyzed, caught in the current of his conviction. Juan leaned closer, locking eyes with Elena. I am not moving. Not today. Not ever again. Her face twisted, caught between fury and fear. The power she wielded so casually, the assumption that her word was stronger than his presence, was crumbling in real time. And then, the unthinkable happened. The captain himself emerged from the cockpit. A tall man with a stern face, his pilot's cap tucked under one arm. He surveyed the scene, taking in the tension, the stares, the silent cameras recording every second. What's going on here? His voice cut through the cabin. Elena rushed forward, words tumbling in a torrent. Captain! Thank God, this man is harassing me. He's dangerous. I don't feel safe. If you don't remove him, I'll— The captain held up a hand. Enough. His gaze shifted to Juan, then to the boarding pass still clutched in his hand. He studied it, then looked back at Elena. His voice was cool, precise. Ma'am, this is his seat. You're in the wrong, gasps. Relief. A ripple of vindication surged through the passengers. But Elena wasn't finished. No, you don't understand. If he stays, I won't fly. This is discrimination. The captain's eyes hardened. The only discrimination I see is yours. The cabin erupted in murmurs, some clapping softly, others shaking their heads at the audacity of her lies. For a moment it seemed the storm was over. Juan's chest loosened, hope flickering that maybe, just maybe, justice would prevail. And then came the twist. The captain turned to Juan, his expression heavy. But sir, because of this disruption, regulations require that we resolve the conflict before departure. Until then, this plane is grounded. The words landed like a thunderclap. The plane wouldn't move. Passengers groaned in frustration. Phones kept recording. Juan's victory was incomplete. Yes, he had been vindicated, but at what cost? The flight was halted. Dozens of travelers would blame him for the delay, not the woman who caused it. The weight of systemic injustice loomed once more, reminding him that even when you win, the battle is far from over. Juan lowered his head, fists clenched at his sides. He had stood his ground, but the fight wasn't finished. Not yet. The cameras zoomed in. The cabin waited. The world beyond the plane was about to witness a story that would ignite headlines, and as Juan raised his eyes, meeting the gaze of every passenger around him, he knew the next words he spoke could change everything. He took a breath, his voice steady but charged with fire. If this plane doesn't move because of me, then let the world see exactly why. The cabin froze. The cliffhanger hung heavy in the air. The plane remained grounded, but something in the air had shifted. What began as one man's fight for a seat had turned into a battle for dignity. A mirror held up to everyone watching, both inside that cabin and, soon, across the world. Juan stood tall, his boarding pass still in hand, his voice echoing in the silence. If this plane doesn't move because of me, then let the world see exactly why. Phones were still recording. Passengers whispered in disbelief. Some were angry at the delay, but more were quietly realizing they had witnessed something bigger than an airline dispute. The captain gave Juan a long, measured look. His duty was to fly the plane, but now he had become an unwilling judge in a courtroom at 30,000 feet. He turned back to Elena. Ma'am, he said firmly, you have two choices. Move to your assigned seat, or you'll be escorted off this plane. Gasps. For the first time, Elena's composure cracked. She sputtered, You can't do that. I have rights! The captain's jaw tightened, and so does he. The moment hit like lightning. The applause started small, a clap from the back, then another from the side, until it rolled through the cabin in waves. Passengers who had stayed silent now found their voices. That's right. Someone shouted. Justice for him, cried another. Elena's face burned crimson. She gathered her bag, muttering under her breath, but the cameras caught everything. As she stormed down the aisle, dozens of eyes followed, phones capturing her retreat like the closing of a curtain on a failed performance. Juan exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, though his heart was still heavy. He sank into his seat, 4A, the one he had paid for, the one he had earned. The seat felt different now, not just leather and space, but a symbol of survival. The plane eventually took off, soaring into the clouds. Yet even as the engines roared, Juan sat in silence, staring out the window. His victory was bittersweet. For every passenger who clapped, how many others would walk away unchanged? For every confrontation won, how many more waited in the shadows? But then a soft voice broke through his thoughts. Sir, a flight attendant said gently, I just want to say, thank you. My son's your age. He goes through things like this every day. You stood up for all of us. Her words trembled with sincerity. Juan felt something loosen inside him. Maybe his fight hadn't been in vain. When the plane landed hours later, Juan expected the moment to vanish into obscurity. But he was wrong. The videos had already gone viral. Headlines screamed across social media. Millionaire passenger confronts racism on flight, refuses to back down. Black man denied his seat. Inspires passengers with powerful stand. Millions watched, millions commented. The world argued, debated, but above all, the world remembered. For Elena, the consequences were swift. Her name, her face, her arrogance, all exposed. She became the embodiment of prejudice, her actions dissected in think pieces and talk shows. She lost her job. Friends distanced themselves. What she thought was a moment of power became her lifelong mark of shame. But Juan's story spread differently. He was no longer just a man in a navy suit. He became a symbol. Invitations poured in, to speak, to share, to inspire. Universities, news anchors, organizations fighting injustice, they wanted his voice, and he gave it to them. Standing before crowds larger than he had ever imagined, Juan spoke not about wealth or business, but about the truth he had lived. Racism doesn't just steal seats, he told them. It steals opportunities. It steals dignity. It steals futures. And if we allow it to go unchecked, it doesn't just break people, it breaks communities. It destroys families. It poisons generations. The audience leaned in, hearts heavy, eyes wide. But courage, Juan continued, his voice swelling with conviction. Courage is the antidote. Courage to stand, even when your legs shake. Courage to speak, even when your voice trembles. Courage to say enough when silence is easier. Because prejudice is loud, but unity is louder. Hate divides, but courage heals. His words rippled across the nation. Students quoted him. Activists carried his story into protests. Parents told their children about the man who refused to give up his seat. Not because of comfort, but because of principle. And for Juan's mother, the woman who had once worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, his fight was proof that her sacrifices had not been in vain. She wept when she saw him on television, not because of the fame, but because he had turned pain into power. The long-term consequences were undeniable. Airlines implemented stricter protocols to handle racial disputes. Diversity training expanded. Conversations that had been avoided were now unavoidable. But the greatest impact wasn't in policies or press conferences. It was in the quiet moments. A teenager, inspired by Juan's story, refusing to back down when mocked at school. A young woman, emboldened to speak against workplace discrimination. A father, choosing to teach his children not just to succeed, but to stand. The ripples spread endlessly. Juan himself remained humble. In interviews, when asked if he regretted anything, he always gave the same answer. No, because sometimes the world doesn't change until we refuse to move. The story of one stolen seat became a lesson for millions. And though Juan's battle had ended in a cabin thousands of feet above the ground, its echoes were heard everywhere, in living rooms, classrooms, boardrooms. Because the truth was undeniable, racism weakens. Prejudice destroys, but unity heals, and courage defeats hate.